Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming tonight. Do we have any additions? Oh, sorry. Yeah, any additions or deletions? All right, anybody registered to comment on action items? All right, moving right into guest reports. We are gonna start with Jason.
Alrighty.
Right?
Oh,
Is that who we're
you know
starting
what?
for guest reports?
There was
No?
policy analytics is going to be first, and then Jason will come down.
Come for yours? Okay.
Sorry, so
Psych.
we're switching.
All right, come on up, Barry.
So, the gentleman approaching the podium, his name is Barry, and Dana got well acquainted with Barry and his work as a fellow certified school business official. And since he has transitioned to an organization called Policy Analytics, why is that important? The state of Indiana uses the General Assembly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Policy Analytics to obtain their financial information for the state. Zach?
We do a lot of work with the state, kind of behind the scenes with the Department of Local Government Finance and with others, so yes.
So there seems to be a degree of trust and a neutrality with Policy Analytics telling the financial story like it is, how it is, without any kind of political slant. And so I wanted to make sure to build validity for you. And then Dana, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
I've had the pleasure of working with Barry Gardner for quite some time. He was in my leadership group at ISBO. We both went through class together. And Barry worked at Wayne Township, right, for several years in my seat as CFO there. And so he knows what schools struggle with, and he knows tax law really well. And yeah, he's been a great partner to help me out with this while we navigate these changes with Senate and Rolled Act 1.
So the purpose of Barry being here tonight, and then we'll pass him the microphone, is should the board decide to pass a resolution to ask our public to pass a referendum, we will need to wrestle through what is that amount. Barry is here tonight to help in that wrestling match. And so he's going to give us a lot to think about, considerations, and a couple of options that we need to chew on, so to speak, between now and April.
So all good news then, right?
I've been full of good news for the last week. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of the board again. I do appreciate the piece about policy analytics. We are a non-advocacy group, and so that's one of the reasons I think that we're often able to be a part of some meetings at the State House. We have some great relationships. Our founder is actually a former fiscal analyst in the State House and was state budget director. Another gentleman in our office was another fiscal analyst in the Senate. So we've got some really good relationships. And again, it's really important for us that regardless of what's being discussed, we're not here to make policy. We evaluate the policy and the options around that to allow groups like yours to make decisions around that. And right now, Policy Analytics is engaged with about 120 districts across the state. And we're going to talk a little bit referendum. We're engaged with, I believe it's now 35 districts that are considering a referendum in the fall of November of 26. There is a list that's being circulated that is about 52 districts that are considering it. We're obviously not engaged with every district. I'm not sure all will go, but I think you'll probably see close to 45 school districts potentially on the ballot this fall seeking an operating referendum. We're going to talk a little bit. Everybody's story is a little different, but there's some similarities here that we'll see tonight, and we'll go through this. Please, as we are, don't hesitate if you have a question. Would like to, if I don't make a point, would like to clarify. Happy to walk through any of that. Let's see if I can learn to drive, or maybe I'm doing it. There we go. SCA 1. Well, one of the first pieces we wanted to take just a look at, and I think is a little bit of the Tri-Creek story, really comes down to some of your property tax revenue. We're not really tonight talking as much about the education fund as we are on your property tax side. But this slide represents the net levy in the operations fund. Again, the operations funds are transportation, our capital projects, technology, all fall into bus replacement, supposed to fall into that fund. And this is looking at an ADM, so we took the top, or 5 districts in similar size above and below, and looked at what you receive in terms of a per student amount on the property tax side in the operations fund. You can see there it's just a little bit over $1,500 per student. And you can see there's some great variety in terms of what districts receive here across this. The state average is a little over $1,900, but I think I want to point out, because this is, I think, a little bit unique, because sometimes average can be skewed a little bit. And so if you look in the top right-hand corner, when you look at the median, so the middle district, it's closer to $2,200. And the bottom 25th percentile is at $1,700. So you're in the bottom 20th percentile in terms of student funding. That creates challenges around your operations fund and being able to support paying the lights, property casualty, all those kind of costs that go into that. Especially, and again, and so we sometimes say, are some districts different? Well, let's take an extra $500 per student, multiply that times your enrollment, and we talk about the revenue that would be. It's a whole different revenue situation, right? That's driven a little bit by assessed value. It's driven a little bit by tax rates, not just the schools, but the overlapping tax rates when we add in the town, the county, the townships, and all of those, all kind of factor into this. But at the end of the day, the story is you do not receive as many dollars per student in the operations fund, and that contributes to some of the challenges that you're facing. And then we're going to, unfortunately, add to that a little bit tonight in terms of when we see some of this data. Sorry, I'm going too fast my clip. I'm trying to figure it out here. This second slide really looks then at Lake County. We wanted to take a look at this. So more districts on here. And then the teal color that's included now is if a district has an operating referendum. And many of the school districts in Lake County have an operating referendum. And really in many cases, this allows them, they're in similar boats, right, where maybe their net levy in the operations fund is on the lower end, and they're supplementing that with an operating referendum in order to get up into that $2,500 per student or more in terms of revenue, right? So again, just creating that discrepancy in terms of funding at the end of the day. The other piece here that kind of to revisit when it comes to SEA 1, Senate Enrolled Act 1, and the changes that happened. And I know we talked on this a little bit briefly, I think last time I was here, of what we saw was going to be coming, was the change that's happening in net assessed value for the district, okay? And we've been used to a situation where net assessed value has been growing, which often allows for us to manage to a tax rate, have additional inflationary dollars coming in, right, that's allowed us to do projects or different pieces. Well, Senate Enrolled Act 1 institutes a new deduction structure. Okay, so homeowners will begin getting a larger deduction off of their assessed value of their home. Typically, it's been about 35%, and then they had a $48,000 standard. Now it's going to move to a 2/3 deduction, which is much larger. Anytime we increase deductions, we push down on net assessed value. They also added a deduction to the 2% class, which is ag, long-term care, and apartments. They've not had deductions in the past at all. That will move to a 1/3 deduction over the next several years. And then they did some changes with the business personal property, the equipment inside of a business was up to $80,000. I didn't have to report a piece of equipment in my business for taxable purposes in the state. That now is up to $2 million at investment level. So now if I have a $1.5 million piece of equipment inside my business, I don't have to pay that state tax on that starting in 27. And that's why you see the assessed value in 27 drops by about 5.5%. That's that business personal property being pulled out, right? So net assessed value is going to go down. What's that mean? It's going to drive up tax rates, but they kind of counteract each other, right? Because as I'm driving up the tax rate, I'm driving down what I'm going to tax against, that net assessed value. So it really kind of offset each other. This will have an impact later when we talk about potential referendum strategies. Because typically our math problem is AV times a rate gives me my revenue. Well, if my AV is going down, what happens? My rate has to then go up in order to generate that same amount of revenue, right? So it may be why if you've heard other districts around you or seen some districts in the fall, up here we had one district up here that went for a referendum and their rate was dramatically higher than what they had before. That was partly driven by SCA 1 because of the new mechanics of the legislation. We have to have a higher rate to generate that. And the biggest year is in 2031 because that's our very lowest point of assessed value. Okay? And so we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this slide really drives a lot of that. The second piece of the SCA 1 language was the new 10% up to $300 homestead credit that homeowners were given. So one, we had the deduction change, and then secondly, we had some really tax relief. And this is after the tax caps. So we're familiar with the tax caps. If I'm supposed to pay an $1,800 tax bill, but my home's worth $150,000, I can only pay $1,500. That's the 1% tax cap. The $300 is money that the school and other units don't collect. Well, now that person's going to get an extra $150 off their tax bill and pay $1,350, and that now $150 is additional revenue that's not collected. And so what this chart attempts to represent is the dark blue, the bottom is what we know as traditional circuit breaker. Okay, so that's what you've been used to, the revenue the district doesn't collect. Starting in 2026, we have this light blue and orange. That is the new 10% credit. So when I go and stack that up across all these homes, that adds up pretty quickly. And we're calling this unfunded credits because we're not really all that creative at policy analytics. But it's really revenue that you're not going to collect is the way to define that, okay? And so the reason in 26 is that they applied it both to the operations fund and the debt service fund. That causes a little bit issue for debt, being able to make your debt payments down the road. So the current legislation, starting really, for all intents and purposes, the district's move will be in 27, you will be forced to take all of that on the operations fund. All right, so that's another hit to operations fund revenue. We see this go up a little bit in 28 and 29. It's going to shift a little bit. But Lake County has what we know as a property tax relief credit. You know, probably never seen it. I will tell you as a school business official, I didn't know a whole lot about it until this last session because it would always happen behind the scenes. But it's really taking local income tax from the county level and using it to offset property tax bills. Well, if a person is already at the caps, they actually use that local income tax to fund the district dollars. That's set to go away now in 2029. It was 28. This recent legislation moved it to 29. So that's why we see your circuit breaker, this kind of dark blue really jump in 28. It'll move to 29. That's that property tax relief credit going away. And because they're at the caps, that impact really comes on the school. So again, just additional impact, but these are dollars that we will not expect the district to collect in the operations fund. And we go back to that earlier slide, we're getting $1,500 per student. Now that's going to really start to begin to decrease as we see these additional impacts, right? So it's all kind of leading into those things. So we'll talk a little bit, what's all this mean? So the other piece that we do for the district is helping to model cash flow, so revenues and expenses, kind of doing a 10-year cash flow projection with some assumptions. And we've built this out with some conversation with the district team in terms of some ways we want to begin to look at this. And this is, again, modeling, and I'll talk through some of those assumptions. I want to go through the assumptions first on the left-hand side there. So we are assuming about a 1.5% increase in the state tuition support, that per student dollars. This last time it was around 1.9 each year, but we're always trying to be a little bit conservative. We don't want to overestimate too much with our revenues coming in. We bring the property tax revenue in from our report for the operations fund, and that includes this impact we were just talking about in terms of those change in dollars. And then on the expenditure side, for this modeling, at least today, we took a look at continuing with 3% increases for both certified and non-certified staff moving forward. Right? One of the things we know is the challenge is how do we continue to recruit and retain teachers? And oftentimes that's through compensation. So we at least wanted to take a modeling, if this was our goal, how would that look and begin to move forward? And then we just have some other inflationary expenses when it comes to utilities, capital project kind of cost, right? Transportation, those pieces. And what this really shows, and it's not some way it's a fair model and it's not, right? Because what this shows is if you did absolutely nothing different and you kept giving 3% raises, we're going to have some sort of financial issue, right? We're going to work through our cash balance, is what the waterfall chart shows there at the bottom, and would be through cash in 2029. It's not modeling out at this point any reactions or changes the district may do, right? So what are those types of things? We could give less in salary and benefits, right? That's one way. We could find ways to reduce cost, right? What's our biggest cost in schools? People, right? And so it would come in some sort of staffing reduction in those pieces. Or the other places that you can begin to look for other revenue. And schools are very limited. Really the only way that you can generate revenue on your own is through an operating referendum. And we don't have access as schools to other revenue sources like a local income tax or any of those pieces that some other municipalities may have. It's really what the state gives us, what you receive in the property taxes, and then potentially the referendum, right? And so that's one of the things that we kind of talk about with districts when we go around having this type of conversation is there's really two ways we can start to look to address what we were kind of talking through with that. One, on one hand, is cost reductions, right? The other is an operating referendum, and oftentimes it can sometimes be both, right? Where we're looking for cost efficiencies along the way, maybe through more things like attrition, where the position comes open, we may decide not to refill that position, right? And just try to do it in a manageable way that way. And then can we get enough of that? Or what's that look like when we start getting deep into those cuts? What kind of impact does that have on students, right? And so the other place is to look at that referendum. And that's at least what we're going to talk through a little bit tonight of what that might look like if the district were trying to maybe move forward with something along those lines.
Barry, I think it's worth noting to anybody in our audience that on that cost reduction side, as we talked about at the last board meeting, since 2023, when the referendum failed, we have cut 10% of our workforce. That was 14 teachers, 10 instructional assistants, 2 assistant principals, a nurse, a guidance counselor, and a safety and security coordinator. And so, which leads to the reason why Barry's here, that we've cut a lot. There's very little left to cut, which is why we need to give very serious consideration for referendum.
And that's the piece. We know there's a lot of schools who, to your point, have moved through those, and so it's kind of what's left to cut. And oftentimes, further cuts are really deep cuts, right, and can have some real impact on the classrooms. And so that's where this decision starts to unfortunately draw us to looking at a referendum as a potential option. Okay, so for the referendum considerations tonight, we're throwing out a number of scenarios because, again, the district is just considering if this is even something you want to entertain. And so we've modeled out a few things for you to look at, and we'll talk about what some of those mean for that. So the first, and I know there's a lot of lines here, so I apologize. It's because we've been looking at a lot of scenarios, right, and trying to really think through this in preparation. And so walking through this slide, the teal line at the bottom is if you didn't pass a referendum. This includes that 3% kind of cash flow we saw before. If we didn't pass the referendum, we're going to have to, again, find some ways to make some pretty dramatic pieces. Then we really started to look at levies. So we looked at a $2 million referendum levy. We looked at a 2.5, a 3, and a 4. Right? It was kind of our first piece of that. And just kind of working the way up, The $2 million referendum levy is the first line, this kind of goldish line here. The 2.5 is the 3, or the 2 is the blue, the red is the 3, and then the light yellow is the $4 million, right? And what we see is we still kind of have this cascading piece, and it gets to a point where we probably would need somewhere in the range of more close to a $4 million referendum to not go through cash. But again, that's assuming we're not making any different cost reductions or any kind of change. We'll continue to give that 3%, right? And that's a little bit arbitrary because we might look at it in some years we're giving 3 and another 2, or we ebb and flow based on kind of what's going. But it tells us that we need at least somewhere probably in that $2 to $3 million at minimum, and that extends our timeline. 2034 would be the last year of the referendum. If you were to go in the fall of 26, you would start getting those dollars in June of 27. So November election gets us dollars starting in June of 27. The last one that we're going to talk a little bit about is this 20-cent fixed rate line, which is the green line. And the reason is because, unfortunately, referendum conversations have become a lot more complicated. And what I mean by that is, for districts that have had, and we had one at MSD Wayne in this piece, we had a referendum rate, right? And so if we had a referendum rate of 20 cents, when assessed value was growing, the revenue would grow with it, right? So it would generate additional dollars moving forward. And that was a little bit of an inflationary piece. Now we're in a situation where 20 cents, or some of these dollars, would actually generate less because of that declining net assessed value. And so there's some strategies that we have to think about in terms of how we work our way to an operating referendum rate at the end of the day, right? The other piece, again, one thing the district has to consider is what's that appropriate level of cash balance, right? We're sitting on currently, a little over $8 million of cash balance. I think it's around 26%. It's a fairly stable cash balance situation, right? How do you also protect that? And why do we have that rainy day dollars? We just saw some things happen to a lot of school districts, both here in Northwest Indiana and just outside of Indianapolis. School track was torn apart, 2 roofs are gone, and insurance costs, right, and things like that. And some of those one-time dollars are important to have on hand. So what's that appropriate piece as well? So when we look at this, here's the challenge with the referendum situation today. I'm going to focus on the $2 million referendum there at the bottom. You can see that the rate in all 3 of these situations, the rate continues to go up from 2027 to 2031. Why? Well, to generate $2 million in 2027 will take a rate of around 10 cents. But as net assessed value declines over the next several years, in 2031, it would take closer to that 11.5, almost 12 cents. Why is that important? The ballot question that the district would have to consider has a maximum rate and a maximum levy. So I have to put on there what's the maximum rate I'm going to need over the next 8 years. Right? So I may only need 10 cents in the first year, and that's all I may plan to take or ask the community for, but I have to put on the ballot 12 cents because that's what I'm going to need to ask for in 2031 to generate that same amount of dollars. So it drives our ballot question, right? And you can see that as we work our way up, you can see that differential there within each of those. The difference in the green line, and it's a strategy piece, and it's a transparent piece, right? Because in the other levy-based scenarios, what you're saying is, we're going to ask for this rate, but we're only going to take this, right? And that's a trust piece that we have to have, right, in the community, that we're only going to take what we're asking for. The other strategy is to look at something like a fixed rate, and that's that green line, okay? So what we're looking at there, and it could be any of these rate levels, but in that scenario, what we're saying is we're going to take the full 20 cents in the first year, right? It's actually going to probably generate a little bit more dollars than what we, quote unquote, might need, but we have to bank some of those dollars because in 2031, we would need 23 cents, but we're only asking for 20 because that's what we've written in the ballot question. And so in our math problem, it may not be enough, so we're using some of the dollars in the early years to offset that, but it's a straightforward answer to the community. It's 20 cents, that's our max rate, here's our impact in those pieces, right? And so it's a strategy consideration that all districts are having to face, who are going out, the 34 the districts that we're working with, are all having similar conversations of what is the best way to approach this, right? The challenge is when that rate's going up, or I'm having to have this conversation of, well, we're only going to take so much, we're going to ask for so much, I guess you should say, versus being able to be very clear of what's kind of coming each year, right? And I'd say a lot of districts are starting to look at this second kind of green line, I guess, strategy in it of just, here's what that is. We're looking over the next 8 years, we need X amount of dollars based on the projections. 20 cents generates that over the next 8 years, and that's what we're asking for. Okay? So what's that mean in terms of a taxpayer? So for a taxpayer in this piece, you can see these are annual impacts for a taxpayer. Okay? So you're looking anywhere from 100, call it 150 to roughly $300 with at least the scenarios that we've written out of what they would have on an annual impact. So again, somewhere in that, call it probably $15 to $25 range monthly, right? If we talked on a monthly basis, many of these we're talking somewhere maybe around $20 a month, right? Of what we'd be asking for.
And that's for the median house?
Yes, sorry. This is for the median homeowner within this piece. We've not yet, one of the things that we do at Policy Analytics, we help districts through this. One is we'll run different, we run like the 25th, the 75th, we'll come in running at 100,000, 200,000 in different levels. We also are able to provide a tax calculator that someone could go in, put their own parcel and homestead in there and say, okay, this is the impact it would have on me as that homeowner, because maybe I don't fit in those. We just haven't gone through that because this is so early in the process. We just wanted to kind of give some sense of this piece. The unique piece of the 20 cent, and this is, as much as anything, I think shows SEA 1 in action, right? The 20 cents rate, if I keep that fixed rate, you can see the impact on the homeowner goes down and then goes back up. That's because their net assessed value is going to go down in the next 5 years, and then when all the deductions are in place, it will start to go back up. And so that's kind of the piece within that, where the others, it's a more, even though I'm raising the rate, the liability stays the same. Why? Because I raised the rate, their net assessed value goes down, it kind of equalizes those two. Right? So again, there's pros and cons to both strategies and how you look at that, but that's the mechanics, at least, that we want to continue that conversation around, right, at the end of the day. So this is just, again, kind of that overall just summary piece. We did throw in just looking a little bit at the cash balance. I do want to go back one piece, sorry, before I get too far, just for transparency for the board, because it's already complicated, so let's add a little more to this. And this is the ballot question. I mentioned earlier I'd have to set a maximum rate and a maximum levy, right? So it doesn't matter which any is 10 cents, 15 cents, does not matter. The ballot question asks you to take a median homeowner and round that to the next 50,000. So the ballot question would not read a median homeowner of 302,000. It would read a median homeowner of 350,000, which is not anywhere close to your median home, right? That's where things like the tax calculator, if you were to go down that route, and other things become important. That's the legislation. They didn't say to round down, it's only to round up, and you have to round to the next 50,000. So it kind of creates a situation where we're taking this rate times a higher than median figure, saying it's the median, and putting that impact out there. And so it skews the data just slightly, but I think is another challenge in all of this, in that piece. And so again, this just kind of takes a summary and taking a look. We ran through a lot of these different scenarios, and then looking again, that cash balance components of it at the end of the day. And again, I think the piece that we keep in, Dr. Anderson laid this out, right, of I don't know how much there is in cost reductions or how we adjust some of those salary projections, right? They all have impact, but it then also comes down to what do you as a district, if you choose to go down this route, do you feel like the community would support, right, in terms of a rate and a level of impact at the end of the day. All those things come into play, and we're just kind of scratching the surface with that tonight in terms of those. Last couple of things I think just to consider, and then I'll be happy to take any questions if needed. The other piece of the legislation changed when we can put a referendum on the ballot. We used to be able to do it both in May and November, and we could do it in both an odd or an even year. Now it can only be in November of an even year. Okay. So for a district that are considering, if you go in 26, if you chose not to, the next time you could look at this would be 28. Okay? If you were to go and it were not to pass, then the next year you're looking is 28. Right? So there's this 2-year gap within those pieces. So it's not as probably responsive in terms of our ability to react with being able to go out and ask for that referendum. And so that creates some pieces. And we just threw up a few, again, summary slides within this. If the referendum is passed in 26, it allows the district to, again, this whole gets into staffing, gets into the programmatic pieces of the district, allows us some stability in being able to maintain those, keeping our cash balance in an appropriate place, kind of that financial stability, for the district. The other piece, we don't have the math on here, and we can provide is, again, those homeowners are getting really 10% off of their tax bill. That was a result of SCA 1, right? So again, and it's off of liability. So it's what I'm paying in taxes. So again, if I'm paying $2,000 in property taxes, I'm getting $200 off my tax bill. Not just in 26, but every year moving forward, right? So I'm going to pay $200 less in property taxes until they change that piece of the law. That, obviously, as we showed earlier, causes impact on your operations fund. Because of that, we're going to see more dollars, we're going to see fewer dollars, more unfunded credits. So really what some districts are talking about is we're simply just asking for some of that back that the state mandated that allows us to hopefully operate in a manner in which you've come to expect here in the district, right? And so we look at that in terms of some way that there has been that offset, that stability. 2028, again, we start working through that cash balance. We're having to look at cuts. And then the challenge, again, is if it doesn't pass in 28, the next time you can go is 2030, right? And so our ability to make quick changes becomes much more difficult. There is that presidential election in 28 versus 26. Some of the theories, a lot of districts, a lot of times used to go in May in the primary, probably because, again, the voters that may be coming were informed, they kind of knew the issue at hand. Where in a presidential election, there's the potential for people to show up not knowing the issue because they're coming out to vote on a presidential election, not sure aware, and then they're voting on something they may not know all the facts or have heard all of the things you may have gone through in presenting your case of the story, right? And so I think that's a piece just to consider in terms of timing as well. And again, I think just if we wait until 28, it's going to be a situation where there's going to have to be a lot of difficult conversations, right? Doesn't mean that there are a lot of districts facing this, right? Not everybody's going to go, not everyone's going to pass. There's going to be some difficult conversations. I think at the end of the day, I'll put my old educator hat on. It's how are we working, proactively, whether it's reductions or referendums, to try to minimize disruptions for the students, right, in those pieces and their quality of education that they're used to here in the district. How do we continue that given some of these financial challenges and things with SCA 1? And I think that's it. I know I've thrown a ton at you, but I'm happy to answer questions.
This board has been very transparent about the possibility of running a referendum. And that word has now infiltrated our community. And there is not one meeting that I go to where somebody makes a statement either from their own perspective or from another community member who's not there. And the statement is, had the school system never built that athletic complex out back, they would not be in this financial situation. Well, my first response is, the district bonded for not only that athletic complex that was, by the way, very dilapidated and run down and almost embarrassing when our visiting teams came to arrive. But number two, what about all the carpet in every elementary school and all the new student furniture that was outdated and dented and worn and used, and the paint, and preparing our schools for the next 2 and 3 decades that we didn't go for a referendum for? That cannot be lost. It's not just an athletic. We bonded for all of that. So back to the question. Had we not gone and sold those bonds for that, would we still be in this financial situation?
Short answer is yes. I mean, the thing we have to remember about school finance is the debt service fund is a siloed fund and isolated. It cannot pay for utilities. It cannot pay for property casualty insurance. It cannot pay for day-to-day expenses of the district that are paid for out of the operations fund that we see these challenges in. It is a separate fund that's driven by the project cost and the bonds that are necessary to pay those back. I mean, to get technical, there is a piece you might have seen slight savings from circuit breaker, but we're talking 100, 200,000 in a year, not the millions that we're talking here. And to your point, not to maybe to separate a little bit, but especially on, I'd say, hearing the investment in the buildings, we often know that preventative maintenance is much more efficient than reactive maintenance. And so there's an American Physical Plant study that says you should invest about 2% of your building's values back into your buildings on an annual basis for preventative maintenance, because if not, those costs build up. You're going to pay them at some point, right? And so any cost, any savings would have been made up in efficiencies, but if you had not done those projects, we'd still be talking about SCA 1, we'd still be talking about the unfunded credits, we'd still be talking about those pieces that are driving ultimately some of the challenges that you're facing.
Thank you for that confirmation. So basically, for a homeowner, you can't go get a home mortgage and pay your light bill with the home mortgage.
Same concept.
And when those bonds were taken on, we didn't raise the tax rate. We stayed within our tax rate with those bonds. So new debt replaced old debt to keep everything still consistent with where we had been. So.
Which I'd say is a common strategy across the state with school districts. And again, trying to be proactive in maintaining their buildings. We ran a study, and I'm really curious. I wish I would have looked this up. I apologize. We ran a study a couple years ago for the associations. We looked at the operations fund net levy per student, and we compared it to the 3 really non-discretionary costs inside the operations fund of transportation, utilities, and property casualty insurance. Those 3 costs on the state average took up almost 75% of that. In districts where we are less than the state average, it often took up close to 100. We had some districts where, and it wouldn't surprise me here in the district, where those 3 costs take up almost all, if not more, than what you're getting in the operations fund net levy, right? So we talk about our operations fund, but it's out the door after just paying those, keeping the lights on, right, and paying for the insurance bills. It doesn't talk about then technology, custodians, maintenance of buildings, all of those pieces. And that's the challenge I think you're seeing in terms of that piece. We often then lean on the education fund to supplement some of that because we have to pay for those things somehow, some way.
Barry, I'll say we were in the 80% range only because we have solar. We have,
I couldn't be
and
better.
so our electric bills were not what the average would be because of the net metering. But with the increases in NIPSCO right now, we're not keeping pace with that, and we're definitely feeling it. So we were on the lower end for what we're getting per student, but only because of the initiatives that we've had here in district to offset that.
To include in those bonds and the funds, the new LED lights to help.
Throughout, yes.
All right, any questions from the board for Barry?
It's a very thorough explanation, thank you.
I would be, if you don't mind, I would be interested to know some of the board's takeaways from Barry's presentation.
Do you think that the success of a referendum is greater or less depending on what the existing tax burden that people are supporting a school with? You've seen like different success rates, like if it's already high, referendum's not gonna go, or there's a certain cutoff where it's successful or not.
So I don't. The one space we don't play in at policy analytics is kind of that political analysis of those kind of pieces. There's some consultants out there that do, but I don't know that answer. In terms of that overall tax burden and what that looks like if they're already feeling that. So I really couldn't comment there.
There's also the fear of the unknown. For people that don't fully understand the purposes of a referendum, they're more likely to vote against it. Whereas they have a clear understanding, or at least a vague understanding, and it allows them to ask more questions, I think that they would be more receptive to the possibility of supporting such a referendum.
I think, for us that we've been doing this now for quite some time and looking at all these tax rates and laws and learning consistently about them, even with all the time we've spent in that, looking at these charts and graphs is a lot to take in and a lot to decipher, even knowing the extra that we know. So being able to break this down and use the tax calculator, I think will be helpful. But the one slide that shows where the amount on the median taxpayer that you would pay in a year. So I'm on 13.
Going the wrong direction here, sorry.
I'm on 13.
I think I'm going the wrong direction here. Why would it not let me? Can you go through? Thank you, sorry. Thank you, Jim.
I feel like that's a really good visual as a taxpayer to see, okay, I'm going to start out at, if we go with the flat rate, I'm going to start out at $294. I'm never going to get back to that. Not even at the end, it's at 281. So seeing that chart and that graph for the whole time of the referendum, this is a really good one that I think we need to keep an eye on and keep at the forefront.
There were several visuals that you provided that give a clear picture of where we're going, what's going to happen to us, our doomsday, if you will, if nothing happens. And it shows it with the numbers associated, and that helps, I would think.
That's a good idea,
understand.
kind of overlay this with what happens if we don't have it. So we could be here or we'll be here.
And I do want to say in this, just again for transparency, because it's become a little bit of an issue with SCA 1 and how things are modeled. So they did not change the assessment system. Okay, so we often talk in gross assessed value and net assessed value. Gross is kind of the market value of my home relatively before any deductions. And we've seen over the last few years, a home might have been worth $250, then $260, then $270, and that's grown, right? They haven't changed that. So in our modeling, we have that gross assessed value still continuing to grow by about a 3 to 4% kind of inflationary piece that we see on a historic basis. That's important, I think, to note, because if we did not show that, these levels would actually be lower. The impact would be lower because the net assessed value would then really drop. So we are, I think, hopefully making as realistic of a projection as we can that we still expect gross assessed value to grow, and that has some impact on this. I think you can, I guess the reason we do that is that we can stand behind our projections, that we're not trying to show a situation that we don't think to be realistic moving forward than that.
It's not extreme in either direction.
It's really based on the last 15 years. We saw a lot the last few years, right? Assessed values have really grown up the last years. That was really because we didn't have enough homes and construction was lagging behind coming out of the pandemic, and home prices shot through the roof. And our assessment system is market-based. So as home prices go up, so does that assessment. we're already seeing across the state that the year-over-year median sales price in a lot of counties is really flat, meaning that home prices are starting to settle in and plateau. So what's that mean for assessed value? We're not gonna continue to see in that residential that, we're gonna see again, return more to historic levels versus the large jumps we've seen the last few years. And that all plays, it's in the weeds, I apologize, but it all plays into this, and I think hopefully you can feel, this, Archie mentioned earlier about our reason I think we have some credibility at the State House is because we believe we bring in realistic modeling that can stand the test.
And there's certainly a lot of uncertainty going on right now in the world, so that plays into the formula.
Barry, if memory serves me right, the ballot question would look and sound something like, would you support the Tri-Creek School Corporation to raise your property tax on the average home worth $350,000? That would impact your annual tax bill by,
So,
you insert on this graph 220, if I'm looking at the orange, the $3 million, by $221 annually? Is that?
yeah, that's technically how it would read. So you would have the, it would state that piece, you would have the ability to give the purpose for why you're asking for it, what it would look to support. So you're allowed to put that language in there as well. From the financial side, it would say a max rate of X and a max levy of Y, and an impact of a median homeowner. If we took the true median homeowner, it would say 221. Unfortunately, in that situation, we have to take the 350, so it may say closer something to 300 in terms of impact, even though that's not actually the median home, because they're forcing us to round up by that nearest 50,000.
Right.
But it would read that figure.
And so then we would want to basically train our voters that whatever you see, then you would divide that by 12, because we think in terms of monthly bills and monthly mortgage. So if I took the 221 and I divided it by 12 months, that would be approximately $18 a month. And so then that gives people a good idea of what that.
That's the marketing tool. You
It'd
keep
be
it as
great if you could
minimal.
put that next slide on there where it shows $221, it breaks it down. What would be extra a month?
So in this example, I noticed there's really a $10 difference between 2027 and 2036 on that particular line. Would it stay that constant?
Yes, because, again, we have this period from 2027 to 2031 where the net assessed value is going down. And it comes down slightly. I know we don't have the data figures in there. It's probably easier to look at the gold line there across the top. You see that come down. Then in 2032, we'll expect net assessed values start to grow. And so it comes back up. But yes, I think that's one of the pieces here. When you're asking for a levy like that, it is very different from the old situation where we had assessed value going up each year, and so that liability potentially would have grown and grown and grown. Here, it's over the next really 8 years, it's going to stay relatively stable, barring that we don't see, we see historic trends in gross assessed value. Right? If all of a sudden home values had some other huge spike again, which is unlikely, then it might vary a little bit. But if we have historic growth, this is what we would see.
With the schools that you've been working with, has any of them said, well, let's wait a couple years and see if the state legislature changes anything to help us? Or is everybody saying we need to be ready for what is to come?
Out of our list, so out of our 34, we've had 2 consider not going in 26. One is not, but it's because technically now, and it doesn't impact, at least currently, the district here, if you run a referendum in 2026, you do not have to share any of that with charter schools. If you run it in 28, you have to share some of that revenue with charter schools. One district we work with has quite a bit of charter share, so if they run in if they run now, they're actually in one of the 4 counties, here being Lake's one of the 4 pilot counties. You have to start that share now, and Lake and Marion and St. Joe and Vanderburgh. So they're going to wait because they don't want to give up those dollars to the charter. So that's really their reason. The other had toyed with it and I think is going to end up in 26. I think most are going in that way because, and we have a lot of districts actually that were scheduled to go in 28 who are coming forward in 26. Why? Well, if I wait until 28 and it does not pass, now I have to wait until 2030. So that scares those districts a little bit because that 2-year gap. I think a lot are nervous. I think, I don't want to speak for those districts, but we at least know the rules of the game right now. 2027 is a budget year. There could be legislative changes with the referendum. What happens when 45 districts potentially go out for a referendum? Is there some reaction to that? I don't know. There may not be. But I think districts are leaning into, we know the impact. The impact doesn't really change. It's more of when we go. Do we go now when we at least know the rules of the game?
Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one more, since he's here. Okay. Going back to that 10% or maximum of $300 supplemental, it's not a credit.
Homestead credit.
Okay. So when I look at this particular graph, theoretically, on this median homestead value, would this home qualify for that 300, full 300?
No, it's because it's not based off of gross assessed value. And I
Okay.
was drawing a blank, the charts in one of our reports, Dana, the fall report we would have done. I want to say it's in the high 250 roughly is their credit portion because it's based again on that liability. So I think to your question, really in that situation, I think if you look at the median homeowner, you're almost asking back for what was given up with the state SEA 1 and the homestead credit.
So, when I took the calculation earlier at $221 divided by 12 and came up with approximately $18 a month, let's just, for illustration purposes, let's say it did come in a credit at $250. So that middle line, it would almost be a net zero. You would support the school district and not pay more tax than what you're currently paying, equating to then $0 more per month. Okay.
And I think that's a fair, in terms of the mathematical piece of it, that is a fair assessment because there is that credit, it's reducing the tax bill.
Right.
And we can run some of those at different rates too to kind of help you fill that in if that's something you like.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very informative.
Anything else along the way we can help with? We're more than happy to. Appreciate the partnership with the district. So
Thanks for making the trip.
Yeah.
Thank you.
it's good to see everybody.
Thank you so much. Right. That's it for guest reports then. Okay. On to curriculum instruction and assessment. Tammy?
All right, so I will be brief tonight. I just have some updates to share with the school board. The first one under curriculum and instruction, our textbook adoption process is underway. We have started training with our teachers already on the first early release day in March, and we will continue with that into May. Curriculum mapping is ongoing with various grade level and content level teams. And we are excited to introduce some new opportunities for our students. We are moving a class that's called Pre-AP English 1 into 8th grade. It's currently taught in 9th grade. And then in 2 years, we will run Pre-AP English 2 during the 9th grade year. So 8th grade, basically an honors level English class could start to get credit in the middle school next year. It's in lieu of 8th grade honors, it will be Pre-AP English 1 is what it's called by College Board. So students who wish to challenge themselves, because it's a Pre-AP course, it's open to anybody who wants to take it. We'll have the Pre-AP Algebra 1 course, they'll have the Pre-AP English 1 course, And then they will have 2 classes of computer science. So that helps with our students coming into high school, and some of them potentially could have upwards of 2, 4, 6 credits coming in, starting as freshmen. So I'm excited to offer that.
So that obviously increases the rigor for our eighth graders.
Absolutely.
What is the other benefit to that? Is there anything else
Sure.
district-wide?
So there is. Right now, we have about 65% of our students graduate from Lowell High School and they go on to college. So preparing our students for that college and career rigor is very important. We have a substantial number of students who take the AP English Language and Literature and Seminar classes in grades 12, 11, and 10. So to help prepare those students for the rigor of those classes, we want to help provide supports for them with a more rigorous course study. We also have, in accordance with Indiana code, we have to accelerate students who on their iLearn summative, which is the final test they take in April, if they score at above proficiency, they have to automatically be accelerated to the next grade level standards, the course that teaches those standards. This year, the state has decided to hold back with the iLearn summative test because they're going to test out the standards and they're going to test out the scores. So we won't get those scores until July this year. It's the only year they're holding back on it. But the state has granted that we can use checkpoint data. So we will use the average of all 3 checkpoints. And those should be finishing up here in the next couple of weeks. So we should be able to know for incoming students next year in grades from grade 5 to 8. So next year, 6th graders, 7th graders, which one are going to be accelerated. And our math teachers have already been working on building a scope and sequence that would include both grade 6 and 7 standards in the accelerated math 6 class, grade 7 and 8 in the accelerated math 7 class, and then of course then the accelerated class is algebra 1 and 8th grade. So we're already trying to get behind that and support our students for more challenging work that they're going to face when they come to high school. And of course, just like with the English, our goal is to have our students take more accelerated courses when they get to AP level, AP Calculus, AP Pre-Calculus, which we put on in our course catalog, and also AP Statistics. The other thing that I just want to update you about too is about assessments. They are underway. We are in the swing of that. WIDA has finished. We have shipped off all of those tests to wherever they go. I think it's in Minnesota, so we are waiting for those results in April. iRead is finishing up right now. We should have those results by the next board election, or before the board election, before the next board meeting. iLearn Checkpoint 3 should be finishing up in the next few weeks, so we should really have some data for you there as well. Advanced placement, and then iLearn is coming up at the end of April, iLearn Biology beginning of May. And this year, we're going to take the iLearn U.S. Government test, which the state doesn't require us to do it, but our teachers would like to increase the rigor in those courses, so we're going to take that test for the first time. We are finished with the SAT, and we had 0 irregularity reports, so that was really, really good. We had most of our students here on that day, and I think they are just finishing up now with kids who are absent and needed to do late testing. That window closes also very shortly. We have our high ability identification process is ongoing. COGAT is finishing up right now, and we will be using the iLearn checkpoints. Normally, we would use the iLearn summative, but since that's being withheld until the results are withheld until July, then we will use the checkpoint data in that determination, and then we will be sending out a notification to parents about high ability placement. And then finally, with professional development, we are continuing with our building thinking classrooms, which we've had a pretty good response. I'm hoping that if some of you have kids at the level of 5 through 12, that they've had some good experiences with those. I had one teacher who told me that he was really surprised at the level of engagement that those students were participating in, and so that's really good. We have somebody in our audience here, Marty, who came and joined us on the training with our teachers, and she was able to see firsthand what that looked like. And then finally, we are starting up a new partnership with Purdue Northwest. The school brings in we have a lot of student teachers in our district, and they said, this is a two-way partnership. So if there's something we can do for you, let us know. And I'm like, yes, we need to do some training with literacy, with the science of reading. And so we're already starting to then work together with them on a series of trainings for next year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I think I took more than 2 minutes, but yeah, a lot going on and doing great things.
Thank you. Question.
Yes, sir.
Did we ever look into the sign language class that the one student emailed?
So
We
Tammy
did.
took the lead on that.
We did. I talked to her about the possibilities. I was in a district once that had ASL as a class, and so it's one that was really popular. But we also talked about feasibility with something like that and bringing in programs. And there are some, factors of we would have to see student interest in those things, and not to shut those things out. But I told her let's talk again after we kind of talk about see what the classes look like, but also some of the things that offsets some of the abilities of bringing in a brand new program. For example, would that then lead to the reduction of Spanish teachers? Would we have to lose sections in those? The cost of curriculum, the cost of, and sometimes with an ASL teacher, it's very difficult to find an ASL teacher. So there are just a lot of mitigating factors. So we just had a good conversation. She was very, very engaged in our conversation.
That last thing that Tammy said, it is an extremely hard position to fill, to find an ASL teacher.
Correct.
And that was my experience as well at a different school.
Right.
Interesting.
So, some of the, if there's a genuine interest there, that might be something that maybe the local library could bring in and offer some kind of ASL classes outside of the school environment.
We also, an idea that I brought up is we could also have an ASL club where we can start talking about the culture that is associated with the deaf community and start talking about bringing in some interest in that way too. So there were alternate ways instead of bringing in a whole new program to see if there's interest in that as well.
I can understand from the student perspective too, being stuck in Spanish as the only option. Unfortunately, budgeting and what we just have kind of gone through with class selections, we don't have a ton of flexibility with that as a result. So
I would say most school districts, even some of the larger ones though, aren't offering very many more languages than 2
Yeah.
even. So it used to be back in the day, right, 20 years ago, you might have 3 or 4 languages that school districts would offer, but they're really paring down now. Spanish is almost always, it's ubiquitous, but there are other than, French isn't even offered in most school districts anymore. German's kind of gone to the wayside. You're lucky if you can find a Latin teacher, for example, if some school districts like that, but it's very difficult to find, I think it's more difficult to find 2 languages now than.
It might be advantageous to look to see what's out there. There may be something locally within the region that people can go to, There's gotta be something existing in the region.
Yeah.
And maybe make everybody aware of that, and for those that are interested, could pursue that avenue.
Absolutely.
But certainly worth the check. I mean, I've always been interested, but I never pursued it.
Right.
thanks,
Thank
Amy.
you.
Thank you.
All right, Dana, business operations.
Okay, so I'm gonna tag team this with Jason. I will give the numbers so you don't have to, okay? If that's fine, and then you can talk about the nuts and bolts of everything. So I wanted to go over the bid results that we had from the Lowell High School old pool infill and related work. The recommendation that was included in the board agenda includes 4 different bid categories here for this that we're recommending, and 1 alternate included in there for right now. General trades, Larson Danielson Construction Company, that's the bid and the alternate to $1,538,000. Metal studs, drywall, and acoustics for Kleckner Interior Systems, $374,130. That includes the alternate 2 work on that one. Fire protection, plumbing, and HVAC for Gatling Plumbing and Heating, $525,000. Electrical, Continental Electric here for $524,400. for a total cost of $2,961,530 for this project within, this is coming from this, Series 23 bonds. This is, planned for, and thankfully through all the savings that we've had in value engineering and everything that we've chosen, we've gone really smart with a lot of our selections here on our, construction and using, some of our vendors that are here and just being smart with our money. We've been able to include the pool in here, the natatorium, and then also include the related work here with the pool, when originally we didn't even think either one of those would be even possible. So again, this is not through a new issuance, this is through the planned budget that we've had from the start. So I can say that we had 11 different contractors show up. We had at least 3 contractors per category, except for the last category, we only had 2, which was the electrical, but, so it was a good competitive playing field. And Jason, do you have anything else to add?
Oh, it was a good turnout. The bids were very competitive. They were close, so
I
it
was just
wasn't
gonna say that, that's how you can tell you've got it
Yeah.
right on the button.
They
The
were-
numbers are relatively close.
Yeah, they were all pretty close. The alternates are in a decent scope of things. They're just looking at some of the other alternates of, with the Gibraltar, if this is feasible or if it's not, especially with the weight room flooring. The plan is to start, doing the wall to separate the field house and the new fitness room, so they can start that in April, and then go from there. So it looks like it's gonna move pretty good. And the timelines are pretty tight, so hopefully we can beat that deadline on that, so. And with the new pool, they've already poured the deep end concrete, the walls for next week, and they're still excavating the shallow end. So they did a water test on the concrete they poured already, so it's moving along,
Any questions about bids?
Yeah, so was the lowest price the only criteria for acceptance, or?
No, I mean, that's what we look at, but that's not the only criteria. Gibraltar and Skillman put a huge spec list together. We probably had 2 pre-bid meetings that they have to go through to know what they're looking at, so they can't, it's just not someone that walks in and goes, I'm gonna bid it and hope I get it. So, most of the contractors we get, we've already had some kind of relationship with over the last 5 years of construction. So I've met pretty much all the contractors and dealt with them on some kind of scenario with construction.
Going back even further, I mean, I can attest to their quality. They're high quality and very reliable and very flexible. If there's something that we see that's not in the plan, they generally go above and beyond. So I'm very comfortable with the vendors.
Are these contractors some that are already here doing some work now?
Some of them have been here within the last year. There's not any new players that we haven't dealt with. Kleckner, we've dealt with them on almost all our construction projects. Larson and Daniels has kind of been off and on. Continental, we had a few years ago for Oak Hill and some of Three Creeks renovations. So we've dealt with the majority of the big players in this, so.
Anything else on construction there for that one? Okay, so the other update I wanted to give you is that I wanted to let you know we're in the season of preparing for next school year. Yes, we're in March, but we're preparing for next school year. And during this time, you'll see, we always have activity on our personnel report, folks that decide to go elsewhere or folks that decide to take other avenues other than continued employment here at Tri Creek. I wanted to update the board and let you know that we are still continuing to look at every single position as it vacates for relevance, for actual potential reduction, and for efficiencies every single time. We're looking to combine positions. Can we do without? Can we wear other hats in other positions? How does that look? Does it stay in this department? Does it go to that department for efficiencies? So I wanted to let you know that we are still looking at that, and we're very cognizant of that during this time, especially after, you know, our presentation with policy analytics. We're doing the same with our utility and resource management. We're going through our water bills, gas bills, electric, all of those, and checking for any kind of trends in the data, and we're still working through that information. We hope to have a transportation presentation to you, hopefully next board meeting. We are evaluating walk zones right now in the district at all our buildings for efficiencies on that, to see if we can take some advantage of those types of potentials for cost savings as well. And then finally, since we are preparing for next school year, we're fully developing a supply and procurement procedure for the whole district, and evaluating every purchase that we have this school year with the intentions of reducing those costs going forward. So it's something we do regardless, but we're even more intense on it this year for next year in hopes of reducing costs. And finally, I wanted to let the board know that I can't believe it's been a year already, but we are in March, and we will be hosting the Region 1 IASBO board meeting, or the meeting this month on the 20th in the North Star again. So Dr. Scott Bowling will be joining us. All the region business managers and school business officials will be here out at the North Star, and he will be giving an update on the legislative session that just ended. So here we are a year later already. I can't believe it.
That went fast.
Yes, it did. So
That was a
you're
good
welcome to
meeting
come
last
if you want. Kyle will have breakfast.
Do what?
Yeah, we'll have breakfast there.
I'll be there.
And that's it. Maria.
Thank you. All right, technology, Jay?
So similar to Dana, we in the tech department are also in preparations for next year. This is typically the time when we start looking at ordering devices and figuring out how we're going to roll things out. Given all of the issues that we've had with our iPads this year at secondary, we have started the search to look at some different devices for those students. So we have procured some sample Chromebooks, as well as the brand new Apple MacBook, the low cost Mac, it's called MacBook Neo, that they are targeting at schools. It's the lowest cost MacBook device we've ever seen. So we are going through that process right now. We're going to evaluate those, put them in the hands of my team, put them in the hands of some of our students and our teachers to get their feedback. And we're also working with Apple to see how we can get some restitution for the devices that we do have, the cases, and the possibility of moving some of those devices to elementary, where we do anticipate staying with iPads for the time being, and hopefully recoup some costs that we would have needed to replace those at that level. So we're maximizing what we've invested in and what we're going to be using for the next few years. So I'll hope to have some information for the board here in a future meeting, because we do expect that to be a fairly large project, and may constitute going out to bid to get those costs down. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good job.
Superintendent report?
Yep, two updates this evening. The first one is to give you an update on strategic planning. So back in January, we did our analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That survey went out to all Tri-Creek staff and the school board. School focus groups. So in January, we met with our district-wide leadership team. This past week, I've met with a combination of Jay and Dana and Tammy and I. Have met with staff at Oak Hill, Lake Prairie, Three Creeks. And then in April, we will meet with staff at intermediate, middle, and high school. The community focus groups, there'll be an opportunity for community members to fill out a survey that will be pushed out, as well as a Scoot town hall meeting. A Scoot town hall meeting in April. Then the timeline is to have draft for the board, some feedback at the main meeting, and a comment period for staff and community to give some feedback, with a final, hopefully, board approval in June, and then the implementation of that for the next 3 years. The second one is pertaining to the vacancy that we've had at Lowell High School athletic director position. And as Dana pointed out a moment ago, as our vacancies occur, it's a prime opportunity to reassess all of the roles and responsibilities of those positions. And so what leads us in that is one of our guiding principles of continual improvement. And so what drives change are opportunities. Sometimes we encounter skill sets and passions of current employees, and that sparks a possibility of a change in our vacancies. Change also needs to have purpose. You don't just change to create change. And so changes are driven by the need, situation, and identifying challenges that then set the stage to make improvements. So, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that might exist with our athletics? And so, as you can see, at our Lowell Middle School, we currently actually have a Lowell Middle School athletic director position that ironically is not formalized anywhere on our extracurricular schedule or in any official job description at the district level. It's kind of a position that happened over time, but there was really no formality for an actual position. That position has been piecemeal together with a teacher who receives a stipend from the extracurricular fund, as well as a different teacher then who comes in during the school day for a couple of periods to take over some of the duties and the workload. Both are full-time teachers, but we need them actually both full-time in the classroom beginning with next school year. So there's another challenge. When you've got teachers that are also fulfilling that role, there have been situations where they're getting interrupted in class. Oh, I've got need for athletic director type of things. Subbing them out when they attend conferences at a conference level meeting outside the district and not readily available during the day to address situations. On the high school end of things, back in 2023, I sat down with our athletic director, the park and recreations director, the town manager to explore opportunity about coming together as an opportunity, knowing that our leagues and these feeder programs channel over into our school programs. That, I think, because of all the different players involved, didn't get traction that we were hoping for. And so that's a challenge, and there's still opportunity for that. I personally met with personnel from the Lowell Youth Soccer League as well as the Lowell Pop Warner, and those partnerships and how we can get more continuity, more collaboration, more communication within those programs, because kids are in both of those. Yeah, and and Katie's mentioning, like, we've had the Oak Hill property partnerships with Pop Warner and the Lowell softball that we created at least at the board level, and now Lowell baseball. They see what's happening and people are excited about it. We need this person in athletics to help spearhead all of that. Your superintendent is involved in all of this. At the moment, there's a piecemeal that we have an opportunity to fix. We have a natatorium that was properly planned and budgeted for in 2023. We looked at models. Our model is the Hobart model. It's a community use facility along with a fitness center with cable weights and cardio machines that we intend to open up to the community, along with the field house walking in the mornings. That all needs oversight and coordination. And when we talk about budget, it requires personnel to be funded by atypical means. And so what does that mean? That means that a big push for facility usage, and that means maybe structuring part of that salary on commission that helps to drive it to be more self-funded than just another draw on our established budget. If you recall, last semester, Mr. Kilmer was here and Jason and talked about facility usage in the district. And there's a little bit of, there's an elementary piece and then there's a secondary piece. And so there is opportunity here to get that all under one umbrella of Lowell, Tri-Creek athletic facilities and athletic facility usage. We're also bringing online the turf fields of soccer, softball, and baseball, bringing on the North Star, and bringing on the natatorium. Another item here that we've made headway over the past couple of years is getting all of these feeder groups, the Pop Warner, the Lowell baseball, the Lowell softball, just to start with, let's use the same maroon red color, because that identifies a community. And so we've already seen that, but this person, there's opportunity to spearhead and continue that movement. All right, so here's the recommendation. To address the current non-existent LMS athletic director position and to address the current LHS athletic director position that will officially be vacant at the end of June, and to fulfill a need for leadership to oversee the launch and operation of our school community natatorium, to encompass both of those positions under one umbrella as Director of Athletic Programs for the Tri-Creek School Corporation. This actually is there's a reference to, you see this in some school districts in Illinois. There was a headline today about Fishers and Hamilton Southeastern area doing that. And then there was a school district in Ohio that caught my attention as well. There's a lot that makes sense about umbrelling all of your district level programs under one supervisor, especially in a day and age where you've got a lot of leagues and a lot of feeder programs that you didn't have 20 years ago or 30 years ago. The playing field has changed. Pun intended. So the job summary, this person would serve as the chief administrator who provides leadership and district-wide oversight of all Tri-Creek school athletic programs, athletic facilities, and the oversight of the complete operation of the new Lowell High School natatorium. You know, when you bring a facility like the natatorium online that's going to be school use and community use on a regular basis, being proactive to have that supervised by one person in that person's department makes a lot of sense and can spearhead a lot of potential conflict. No, we had that. No, you didn't. And you see how that helps to alleviate that. Because it's a district-wide program, it would report then to the superintendent instead of the building principals. Rationale and benefit. Provides continuity of all athletic programming from our entry-level skill development programs through the varsity level, so that when the director of athletics hires a varsity coach, that then sets the stage for those two to work together on all the hiring of that program all the way down to that beginning level. For those people to then meet with our feeder programs and our leagues to coordinate all of that effort. That's the second bullet of streamlining the collaboration, but not just with the leagues, but with our Parks and Recreations department as well. And that comes with facility usage. Talked about the proactiveness of one person overseeing all of that, centralized branding and consistency in the expectations of our student athletes and our coaches. If it's the board's pleasure to approve this recommendation this evening, we would collect applications for the next 2 weeks. We would conduct round 1 and round 2 interviews between March 30th and April 6th. And then we would hold a final round interview as needed on April 7th, conduct our final background checks, and then the goal is to come back to the board at its next meeting on Thursday, April 9th.
Seems pretty aggressive.
It's a very aggressive. We know that we've got a natatorium to open in August of 26. And so this would be the first step. we know that then there's another piece to this, and that other piece is now how do we plan for that natatorium, and what are the duties? Do we need additional support? We also need to take a look at the middle school programming, and if that falls under one umbrella, the coordination of that. And so then the idea would be to come back then to the May board meeting and update the board on any kind of restructuring within the Tri-Creek athletic program. This is an action item later on the agenda, so we'll entertain any questions or comments.
I think it's a pretty aggressive schedule. I'm concerned about the background checks, because we'd certainly want thorough background checks and reference checks. It's certainly something to shoot for, but it seems quite tight. And I'm all for the one director to oversee everything. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, to be able to work at the lower grades and make sure that there's consistent I don't want to say grooming, that's a bad word, but preparing students to grow as they move through the grades. So I think that's good, and I've always been an advocate for that.
I think to speak to the aggressiveness, if it becomes April 9th and we're not ready to make a recommendation, then we just delay it.
That's what I'm afraid of.
We
I don't
delay
want to
it
rush through. I want a thorough job. But, it's a schedule to work for, but if it doesn't work, don't lose faith in it.
We can always have a second board meeting if we have to as well.
So what are there's obviously how are we getting by now? We have an athletic director, right? So then this person is taking over responsibilities of new tasks, right? So are there changes in our current salary range for this position?
So the current salary is taken by a person who has been in the career for 45 years. So the current salary is on the high level.
Well, we have an established range for an athletic director now, right? Like
No.
an entry level and then
Correct. So
based on years of experience, we have certain tiers.
when we went to go write the job description, there was no existing job description for athletic director in Tri-Creek schools because there wasn't one that existed.
So what kind of salary range are we looking at? Are we thinking about? Can we see that?
I can tell you right now, you're probably, depending on skill set, experience, the quality level of candidate, you're probably looking anywhere between 90 and 105. Again, we're not to that level yet. We would do comps. There are several factors that would come into play. So
We pulled a
Get a land on-
survey last April, and I've got those numbers for us for athletic directors and assistants from other districts in the area. They vary in range of days, anywhere from 230 days up to 260. One was 205, Westville. So it really depends on what we're looking at for league schools, but Dr. Anderson quoted the salary range similar to what we saw in the survey.
And so with this addition, this position, do we look at then needing additional support staff?
could be.
Because an athletic director, what Patty does right now is a full-time job.
Right.
So if we're adding more to the plate,
Yeah, well, we always knew from the very beginning that additional staff would need to be hired for the natatorium.
right? The
That
one
was,
person
yeah,
that
that
was
was
what,
always
commission-based
a
or-
part of a full-time employee would be needed for that. And so, obviously, in the early first hour of our board meeting tonight, we're very cognizant of the challenges that we have. But again, going back to taking a look at facility usage and the income that may come off of the natatorium, which is always part of the business plan, paying a big chunk of that full-time employee, and if you add on commission as an incentive to that, and so then you've got a range, that makes it much more affordable. We can't build the new natatorium and have it sit empty because you don't have anybody to run it, and so.
I agree with that.
Something I wanna bring up too, we keep talking about the, what, you brought it up with the referendum. Why do we have all these money that we're putting into the athletic fields when we could be using it to something else? Why do we need somebody to do all of these things? Granted, athletics are important, they have their place. One thing that has changed in the athletic field is that students are allowed to transfer. And they're looking to go to schools to play that offer them the most opportunity and the best experiences. And so we have the opportunity to retain students and bring in more students with this role. So what does that mean to us? That means more money, more ADM. So it's not just the revenue side of utilizing our facilities, it's also maintaining and recruiting more students into our schools to bring us that extra money to create a sounder financial situation for us.
Not saying you're wrong or right, but do we have like some kind of figure to say how many students we currently lose due to athletic opportunities elsewhere?
Well, we know what we're gaining with
With like exit interviews when people leave the school and we say like, why are you leaving? They say, well, because I want to play football for this place. Is that, do we know that or?
Years ago,
Yeah, I don't
you
know, it might
couldn't
be.
leave a school for sports. It was academics only, and if you were a good baseball player, whatever, and there's a better team at another school, you couldn't go there for that sole purpose.
I know, but sometimes like the optics too, like if
You can now.
if we're seriously considering a referendum run, and then we're saying that we evaluate and assess the need for positions, sometimes like perception of something like this can be counterintuitive to what we just talked about in the last update.
Right.
And then we go to this one and we're like, but we wanna add more stuff, And I know we have more to take care of with that, and we want it to work the way that it was intended, but that was just my question.
It is all under one person though, and as opposed to two or possibly
Well, yeah,
three.
it should be under one person.
Right. I agree.
I definitely know we have lost one football player this year at the semester. So those are starting to get tracked and paid attention to. And then I also know our wrestling program has brought in a minimum of 10 wrestlers in the last 2 years, to include females as well, and then their siblings. So that one program alone has brought in. I know soccer brought in some more this year. I know of a couple people that are playing here as freshmen for prospects of football. So it is starting to, the open enrollment is really starting to pull people to Lowell. And those are conversations that I'm having often out at different sporting events. So,
So on the flip side too, then, you
Yeah.
bring more in instead of losing,
correct,
right?
that's the goal.
And Andy, you are spot on. It's the optics of how can you talk about budget reduction and yet you're adding. And that's the whole reason of this restructure and developing a system for the facility use. Like, again, you can't expect that facility to operate on its own. We always knew from the very beginning, I'm not speaking to you, but to the public, somebody has to run it. And if it's going to be maximized with facility usage, that takes a person to get out there and hustle and publicize and recruit and solicit business. And again, the motto is for that to primarily help to pay for that position. And we will have to hammer that home because you're spot on.
Because like when someone says like, okay, well, what were your admin expenses last year compared to this year? And not really seeing any positions or knowing what kind of roles they are, just looking at a hard figure that it can sometimes go against what you're trying to do.
Context around that.
So maybe something where, I don't know, there's a bonus structure based on funds generated from facility use that could supplement the position.
Right.
To bring that number down or to justify it by saying like, well, look at, they're getting a cut of it, but we're getting 95% or
The
90%.
commission based.
Yeah.
So as we move big rock first, find person, and then establish that, and then take the next step and finish building the rest of the new system.
So what's the visibility of a posting like this? Does it get advertised or?
So it will be pushed out via the Indiana Educational Job Board, where a lot of people go to monitor. We, I believe, can get it posted on an athletic listserv, kind of similar to what we did with the football coach. And there'll be an email that goes out to all staff to just say, hey, this is an internal and an external posting. And we will also push it out on our Facebook to garner applications. I can tell you that when we pushed out the announcement of Patty's retirement, I started immediately getting emails and text messages of people seeing that. So people's eye are waiting for this posting to go up.
Do we use Indeed or anything like that to post it?
We can. We haven't had a whole lot of luck with Indeed, but it is something that we can put on Indeed.
All of those automatically pick it up from the sources that we put out there through the job bank and through our AppleTrack system. So sometimes Indeed and LinkedIn will pick up our jobs. So
Sounds good.
Any other comments, questions? Got anything else on your superintendent report?
I do not.
That was a great presentation. I liked the slideshow. All right, board member reports. Anybody got something to say?
No, I was unfortunately not able to make it this last board meeting for NISAC.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and move into action items. Looking for a motion to reappoint Gloria Kresha as Tri-Creek School Corporation representative to the Lowell Public Library Board of Trustees.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Number 2, approve the overnight study trip for Lowell High School Red Devil manufacturing students to participate in the Skills USA Leadership and Skills Competition at the Indiana State Fairgrounds in Indianapolis, Indiana from April 10th to the 11th.
Make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Number 3, approve the overnight athletic trip for Lowell High School gymnast Kendall Fiddler to participate in the ISHAA Girls State Gymnastics Competition at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana from March 13th to 14th, 2026.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Best of luck to Kendall, our first gymnast in many years to represent Lowell at state, and she is only a sophomore, so I expect to see her there a couple more times.
What's her events where she can?
She's going for floor.
Floor, okay.
Yep.
That was always my jam too.
Was it?
I was a great floor gymnast.
I can see that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 4, award of bid packages for the pool infill project that we heard about from Dana and Jason. Motion, please.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Number 5, approve the athletic director job description that Dr. Anderson just went through.
I'll
Motion.
make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, action items, we'll do these all together. Approve meeting minutes from Thursday, February 12th, 2026. Payroll and claims and personnel report.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, here we go. We have a lot of donations, 19. We will approve them all together once I get through the list. All right, number 1, $29.18 donation from Costco FundStream for Lowell High School student activities. Number 2, $1,200 donation from the Lowell Lions Club Charities of Lowell, Indiana for Lowell High School Pride Banquet. Number 3, $1,340 donation from Tri-Creek Lumber and Hardware of Lowell, Indiana for Feed Them Forward. Number 4, $268 donation from Rangeline Presbyterian Church of Hebron, Indiana for Feed Them Forward. Number 5, $75 donation online from Russ Marash family and Maria Jordan for the Feed the Forward program. Feed them forward. Okay. Number 6, $50 online donation from Faith Sealing for the Feed Them Forward program. Number 7, $25 donation from Gail Pike of Lowell, Indiana for Feed Them Forward. Number 8, donation of 3 DeWalt Tough System 2.0 storage boxes with hand carts valued at about $350 from Lowell True Value Hardware of Lowell, Indiana for the Lake Prairie Elementary School Robotics program. Number 9, $750 donation from Lowell True Value Hardware of Lowell, Indiana for the Lake Prairie Elementary School Robotics program. Number 10, donation of brass, 73 kits of 2-inch design by 5s and 3-inch design by 7s plus prints, don't know what those are, valued at a whole lot of money, $35,162 from buildsubmarines.com. Maritime Industrial Base Program, U.S. Navy, for the Lowell High School Machining Program. Number 11, $1,000 anonymous donation, 8 $25 Walmart gift cards, 6 $25 Aldi gift cards, 16 $25 Strax gift cards to support Three Creeks Elementary School families in need. Number 12, $1,125 anonymous donation to support Lowell High School's New Tech Venture Class study trip. Number 13, $1,800 donation from Lake Prairie Elementary School PTO for field day shirts. Number 14, $184.95 donation for Lake Prairie PTO for the second grade study trip. $189.89 donation from Lake Prairie PTO for the third grade study trip. $105.30 donation from Three Creeks PTO for the third grade study trip. $460 donation from Three Creeks PTO for the third grade study trip. $1,790.88 donation from Three Creeks PTO for fourth grade end of the year trip, and a $54.25 donation from Three Creeks Elementary School PTO to support the autism class study trip. That's a lot of fantastic donations. I have a
I'll
motion.
make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Thank you to all of fabulous donors.
Yeah, I'd like to tabulate how much it is. That's quite a bit of money.
That's a lot, yes.
We have a very generous community.
We do. All right, and thanks for all the people who worked on bringing those donations in. I'm sure some of those took some work from staff members and community members as well. Okay, public comment not related to action items. None? All right, spring break is scheduled for Monday, March 23rd through Friday, March 22nd or 27th, 2026. The next meeting of the Tri-Creek School Board of Trustees is scheduled for Thursday, April 9th at 7 p.m. Meeting is adjourned.